Welcome back to American Agenda. Job numbers are unexpectedly growing in the U.S., and the economy is looking toward a recovery now. Dunkin' Brands, the company behind major coffee chain Dunkin' Donuts, has announced that they will be looking to hire 25,000 new employees as communities begin to reopen. And is the economy going to come roaring back? That's a question a lot of folks are asking. To weigh in, let's welcome CEO of Careerminds, Raymond and Stockton University finance professor, Michael Busler. So, Professor, what's your take on this? Because it seemed like everybody was getting really good at counting how many people lost jobs, and lo and behold, we actually gained 2.5 million.
So I think the gain in May was real, and I think in June it'll be even greater. So the recession, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, which classifies these things, they say began in February. I think it probably began in March, but say it began in February, probably got over in May, and we're starting a recovery. Now the question is, what will the recovery look like? And economists use letters for this. The one I think, and the one President Trump thinks, is a V-shaped recovery, which means we ended up dropping significantly, but we're going to turn around quickly and go back up again. That is what I think is going to happen. The consensus view among economists, though, is a U-shaped recovery, which means we went down and we're going to linger at the bottom for a while until we start back up again. And the logic there is, even though the economy's reopening, only parts of it are reopening. And it's going to take probably a month or two for the entire economy to reopen, and that's why we'll drag on the bottom before we go up. What we're trying to avoid is an L-shaped recovery, which we had after 2009. So things went down, but then they were very slow to come back. Indeed, it wasn't until 2013 until we got back to where we were before. One last scenario is the W. The W means we went down, we are coming up, but suppose an event happens like the virus flares up again in the fall and we go back into another recession and then go up. So that's a W shape. So there are 4 different possibilities. I think a V is the most likely, and I expect a very strong recovery, which has already started.
All right, Raymond, do you agree that we're on track for a strong economy?
Well, first of all, I do think all these letters are starting to confuse me, but I do think economists were saying that, you know, U-shape was likely, but when you dig into the numbers from April, 20 million jobs were lost. I think that, first of all, we had to recognize 80% were on furlough, 50% were in travel and tourism. So, you know, beginning of May, countries opening up, and it's expected that people are going to be coming back to work. The question was what kind of an impact would that have on the numbers? What I think is really interesting, and it's really directed to this 2.5 million jobs we're seeing, the government put $500 billion into small business hands. And I think some of that was to keep from laying off employees, but for organizations who not necessarily really needed that money, I see small businesses hiring. And so I do feel like there's a V-shaped recovery, but I don't think it's just because the economy is opening up, people are going back to work. I think it's that stimulus that's really impacting small businesses.
Yeah, Michael, let's talk about that, because a lot of people say that money, the fact you have some of the fiscal going to average folks and then Wall Street getting some of the money, especially from the Fed, you have a scenario in which Wall Street really isn't in sync with Main Street, and until Main Street really recovers, we're not going to have a V shape or a W.
I think the recovery, though, will be fairly quick, just for the points that were mentioned. The federal government stimulated the economy by almost $3 trillion. Now, what that did, it gave virtually every adult who paid taxes last year or the year before $1,200. A family of 4 got $3,400, whether you were negatively impacted by this coronavirus or not. So you got that money. Secondly, the people that were unemployed, the federal government added $600 a week to their unemployment benefits. I saw a study that said 68% of the unemployed people are now making more money being unemployed than when they were working. That's going to cause some problems in the future. But in the short term, it gives them money to spend. So those two things will give consumers a lot of money to spend. They've been locked down for a number of weeks. They're anxious to go out and spend that money. The other point that was made is business has money to keep their employees going. And the federal government will lend them money to pay their payroll expense and some of their other expenses for 2 months. As long as they don't lay anybody off, the loan ends up turning into a grant and they don't have to repay it. So the idea with the stimulus was you'll stimulate demand by giving consumers more, and business has money to meet the supply, and that's why I think a V-shaped recovery.
Yeah, Raymond, Michael brought up a good point talking about the unemployment. A lot of people making more money on unemployment than they did when they were working. Do you think that will stop people from going back to work?
Absolutely. It's definitely going to have an impact. When you're making, $50,000, $60,000 a year, you're getting your unemployment plus $600, you're essentially made whole. But I think what workers have to consider is that that's only a temporary measure. So if you're, if you're not going back to work, that's just going to impact your job long term. Companies do have the right to replace those positions. So I think that's a short-term scenario.
All right. Raymond Lee and Michael Busler, thank you so much for joining us today. And